We were told the story like this: a perfect garden, two innocent humans, one forbidden tree, and a single rule: do not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. They ate, and everything fell apart. Sin entered the world. Death followed. Humanity was cursed. Simple, clear, moral lesson. But as adults, when we slow down and read the text carefully, something feels deeper. Why would God place the tree there at all? Why forbid knowledge? What exactly is the knowledge of good and evil? And if God is all-knowing, did he already know they would eat? Tonight we revisit the story found in the book of Genesis, not as a children's warning about disobedience, but as a profound human drama about freedom, awareness, and the cost of consciousness. The garden is described as good, very good. Adam and Eve walk freely. They are naked and unashamed. There is intimacy, innocence, harmony. But in the center of the garden stand two trees, the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Already the symbolism is powerful. Life, knowledge. Why place them in the center? If the goal was obedience, why not remove the temptation entirely? Is love meaningful without choice? A world without alternatives is not freedom, it is programming. So perhaps the tree is not a trap, but a test of autonomy. But then comes the serpent. The serpent does not deny God outright. It asks a question. Did God really say? That question echoes through history. Did God really say? God really mean it that way? Why would knowledge be dangerous? And here's something we often overlook. The serpent says their eyes will be opened. When they eat, their eyes are opened. They realize they are naked. They feel shame. So was the serpent entirely lying? Or was it telling a partial truth? If knowledge opens eyes, then what kind of knowledge is this? In Hebrew thought, knowledge often means experience. So this may not be intellectual knowledge. It may be experiential moral awareness. Before eating, Adam and Eve are innocent, but childlike. After eating, they become morally American. Like humanity's transition from innocence to responsibility. But here's the tension. Why would God forbid moral awareness? Is ignorance preferable, or is the issue timing? Consider this possibility. Perhaps the tree represents autonomy, deciding good and evil for oneself rather than trusting divine wisdom. Not knowledge itself, but self-determined morality. If that's the case, the story becomes less about curiosity and more about authority. Who defines good and evil? God or humanity? And that question feels strikingly modern. Now, let's humanize this moment. Imagine Eve standing before the tree. She sees that it is good for food, pleasant to the eyes, it's desirable to make one wise. There is nothing grotesque here, no violent rebellion. It's curiosity, desire, growth. Is curiosity a flaw or part of being human? Every scientific discovery, every philosophical breakthrough, every act of progress begins with curiosity. So why is curiosity punished here? Or was it the desire to transcend limits that carried consequences? Because immediately after eating, something changes. They hide. Before they walked openly. Now they conceal themselves. Awareness brings vulnerability. God asks, where are you? Not because God lacks information, but because relationship has shifted. And then comes blame. Adam blames Eve. Eve blames the serpent. Responsibility fractures. This feels painfully human. When awareness increases, so does defensiveness. Then come the consequences. Pain and childbirth. Toil and labor. Exile from the garden. And here's perhaps the most fascinating detail. They are removed not because of the knowledge, but to prevent access to the tree of life, lest they live forever. So, immortality combined with moral corruption would be catastrophic. Does that imply that mortality is mercy? That finite life prevents eternal brokenness? That exile is not just punishment, but containment? Another question emerges. If God knew they would eat, was this inevitable? Was the garden a stage for a necessary transition? Some theologians suggest humanity had to grow up. It's like a child leaving home. Innocence cannot remain forever. But growth always involves risk. Could the story symbolize humanity's awakening from instinct to moral agency? Anthropologists describe early human development as a leap in consciousness. Self-awareness, moral reasoning, complex decision-making? What if the Genesis narrative is a theological expression of that awakening? It's not a literal fruit, but a metaphor for consciousness. And consciousness is heavy, because once you know good and evil, you cannot unknow it. You carry responsibility. And maybe that is the real burden. But let's return to the central question. Why didn't God want them to eat from the tree? Perhaps it wasn't about knowledge itself. Perhaps it was about trust. Would humanity trust divine wisdom or seize control? Would they wait or grasp? Isn't that tension still with us today? Technology advances faster than wisdom. Power increases faster than restraint. Knowledge expands, but moral maturity struggles to keep pace. Maybe the story isn't ancient at all. Maybe it's happening constantly. Every time we pursue knowledge without considering consequence, every time we define good and evil based on preference rather than principle. And yet, notice something beautiful. God does not destroy Adam and Eve. He clothes them. Even in exile, there is care. Even in consequence, there is compassion. The story doesn't end with annihilation. It ends with humanity stepping into a harder world, but not alone. Perhaps the garden was never meant to be permanent. Or perhaps it was a beginning. And perhaps the tree was not simply forbidden fruit, but the doorway into human complexity. So now we ask ourselves, if you stood before that tree, would you have eaten? Is innocence worth preserving at all costs? Or is growth worth the pain it brings? And is the real contradiction in the story? Or in our struggle to balance knowledge and wisdom? If this exploration challenged the way you've understood Adam and Eve, take a moment to like this video. It helps this channel reach others who are searching for deeper conversations about scripture and meaning. And if you want more documentary-style explorations of biblical contradictions, ancient symbolism, and the human questions behind sacred stories, subscribe and turn on notifications. Because sometimes the forbidden fruit is not about rebellion, it's about becoming human.